I'll never forget the camping trip I took with my friends to Arizona back in 2019. We'd been planning it for months, just a weekend getaway to disconnect from everything and enjoy the desert landscape. We picked one of the most remote campsites we could find. I'm talking middle of nowhere remote. The kind of place where you drive down an unpaved gravel road for 30 minutes without seeing a single other car or person. When we finally arrived at our spot, the sun was just starting to set. The desert stretched out endlessly in every direction. Just sand, rocks, and scattered brush. The silence was almost unsettling at first. No highway noise, no neighbors, nothing. Just us and the vast emptiness of the Arizona desert. We set up our 3 tents in a small cluster, gathered some brush for a fire, and spent the evening doing exactly what we'd hoped. Talking, laughing, roasting hot dogs, and watching the stars. The sky out there was incredible. With no light pollution for miles, you could see the Milky Way stretched across the entire sky like a glowing river. By midnight, we were exhausted. We put out the fire, said our goodnights, and retreated to our individual tents. I remember zipping up my tent, climbing into my sleeping bag, and feeling completely at peace. This was exactly what I needed, just pure, quiet isolation. I don't know exactly what time it was when I woke up, maybe 2 a.m., maybe 3, but something had jolted me awake. At first, I couldn't figure out what it was. I lay there in the darkness of my tent listening. Then I heard it. The unmistakable sound of tires crunching over gravel. A car was approaching our campsite. Now, hearing a car at 2 in the morning in the middle of absolute nowhere immediately sent a spike of adrenaline through my system. Who would be out here at this hour? We were literally the only campsite for miles. There was nothing else out here, no facilities, no other camping areas, nothing. Just empty desert and this one gravel access road. I heard the car pass by our tents slowly. The crunch of gravel got louder, then softer as it passed. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just someone who'd gotten lost and was turning around. But then my stomach dropped. The crunching sound was getting louder again. The car was coming back. I heard one of my friends unzip their tent slightly. "Do you guys hear that?" They whispered into the darkness. "Yeah," I whispered back, my heart starting to pound. "Stay in your tent." The car wasn't just passing by this time. I could hear the engine slow down, and then it stopped. The engine was still running, but the vehicle had stopped moving. And it had stopped in a position where I could see the glow of headlights against the fabric of my tent. I very carefully and very quietly moved to peer through the mesh window of my tent. What I saw made my blood run cold. About 40 feet away from our campsite, positioned on the gravel road, was a dark-colored SUV. Its headlights were aimed directly at our 3 tents, flooding them with harsh white light. The engine rumbled in the silent desert night, but I couldn't see who was inside. The headlights were too bright, creating a wall of glare that made it impossible to see the driver or if there were passengers. "What do they want?" my friend whispered from their tent. "I don't know," I replied, my mouth suddenly dry. "Just don't move." So we laid there, frozen, barely breathing, watching the shadows cast by those headlights against our tent walls. My mind was racing through possibilities, and none of them were good. In the middle of nowhere, at 2 in the morning, why would someone stop their car and just sit there, pointing their headlights at 3 tents full of sleeping people? 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. The car didn't move. The engine kept running, the headlights kept blazing, and whoever was inside just kept watching us. I reached slowly for my phone, hoping maybe by some miracle I'd have cell service. Nothing. Not even one bar. We were completely cut off from any help. If something happened out here, we were on our own. "Should we go out there?" one of my friends whispered. "Absolutely not," I said immediately. "We have no idea who that is or what they want." My hand found my knife that I kept near my sleeping bag. I gripped it tightly, though I knew that against whoever was in that vehicle, it probably wouldn't do much good. There were 3 of us, sure, but for all we knew, that car could be full of people, and they clearly had the advantage. They could see us illuminated by their headlights while we couldn't see them at all. The waiting was torture. Every second felt like an hour. I kept expecting to hear a car door open. I kept expecting to hear footsteps approaching. Kept imagining the absolute worst-case scenarios. Were they just watching us? Were they waiting for us to come out? Were they deciding what to do next? After what I later learned was about 7 or 8 minutes, though it felt like an eternity, the engine revved slightly. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. They were either leaving or they were about to do something. The car started moving, but instead of driving away, it crept forward slowly, the headlights sweeping across our campsite as it turned. For a horrifying moment, I thought it was going to drive straight toward us. But then it completed its turn and the headlights pointed away from us, back down the gravel road. The car drove off slowly and we watched the red taillights disappear into the darkness until we couldn't see or hear it anymore. We didn't say anything for a long time. We just laid there in our tents, hearts pounding, listening intently for any sound of the car returning. But it didn't come back. The desert was silent again except for the wind rustling through the brush. "What the hell was that?" my friend finally said. "I have no idea," I replied, "but I don't want to find out." None of us slept the rest of that night. We laid in our tents with our knives out, jumping at every sound. As soon as the sun started to rise around 5:30 a.m., we packed up our camp in record time and got out of there. We reported it to the local ranger station on our way out. They took our information but said they'd never heard of anything like that happening in that area before. They had no explanation for who it could have been or what they wanted. To this day, I think about that night. Who was in that car? What were they planning? Were they just trying to scare us? Or did they have something worse in mind and decide against it? I still go camping, but never somewhere that remote. And I always make sure I have cell service, because the scariest thing in the wilderness isn't the wildlife or getting lost. It's other people, and you never know what they're capable of until it's too late. This happened to me and my buddy Chris. We'd been wanting to go camping for a while, and we found this perfect spot about an hour outside of town. It wasn't an official campground, just a remote area off a Forest Service road where camping was permitted. We'd actually been there the weekend before and had the entire place to ourselves. It was peaceful, quiet, and exactly what we were looking for. So when we came back the following Saturday, we expected the same thing. We got there in the late afternoon, set up our tents, gathered firewood, and got a nice fire going as the sun went down. The weather was cold but clear, perfect for sitting around a fire and just talking about life. Everything was great until about 9 p.m. We were sitting by the fire, cooking some food, when I first heard it. A rustling sound coming from the woods behind us. Not close, maybe 30 or 40 feet into the tree line, but definitely there. I glanced at Chris, and I could tell by his expression that he'd heard it too. "Probably just a deer," he said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "Yeah, probably," I agreed, though something about it didn't feel right. We went back to talking, but a few minutes later we heard it again. This time it was in a different location, off to our left instead of behind us, and it sounded bigger than a deer, like something heavy moving through the underbrush. "Okay, that's weird," Chris said, standing up and grabbing his flashlight. He shined it toward where we'd heard the noise, but the beam just showed trees and darkness, nothing moving. Over the next 10 or 15 minutes, we kept hearing sounds, footsteps, breaking sticks, movement in the brush, and it was circling us. Whatever was out there was moving around our campsite in a wide circle, staying just beyond where our firelight reached. My mind immediately went to bears, even though bear attacks are incredibly rare. But the way it was moving, deliberately, almost methodically, didn't seem like animal behavior. It seemed calculated. "Maybe we should get our weapons," I said quietly. We kept knives and a hatchet in our gear for processing firewood and general camping purposes, but suddenly they felt like defensive weapons. We each grabbed a knife, and I held the hatchet. We stood by the fire, backs to each other, scanning the darkness with our flashlights. The sounds continued, but every time we'd shine a light toward them, we'd see nothing, just empty woods. But the noises were real. We both heard them clearly. Something was definitely out there. Then, as suddenly as they'd started, the sounds stopped. The forest went completely quiet. No rustling, no footsteps, nothing. Just the crackling of our fire and the wind through the trees. Somehow the silence was even more terrifying than the noises had been. Chris and I stood there for probably 10 minutes, barely breathing, just listening. Neither of us wanted to say it, but we were both thinking the same thing. What if it wasn't an animal? What if someone was out there, watching us? That's when we saw the lights. A flashlight beam, followed by the glow of a lantern, appeared in the woods about 50 feet from our camp. Someone was walking toward us. "Hello?" A man's voice called out from the darkness. Chris and I exchanged a glance. We tightened our grips on our weapons, but didn't put them down. "Yeah?" I called back, trying to keep my voice steady. A man emerged from the tree line into the glow of our campfire. He was maybe in his 30s, wearing jeans and a heavy jacket. He looked disheveled. His hair was messy, his face was scratched up, and his jacket was torn in a few places. But what really caught my attention was his eyes. They were wide, darting around nervously, like he was terrified of something. "Hey, man," he said, his voice shaky. "Sorry to intrude. I saw your fire and I need help." Chris and I didn't relax. If anything, we tensed up more. The situation felt wrong on every level. "What kind of help?" Chris asked, his hand clearly visible on his knife. The man noticed our weapons and raised his hand slightly, like he was trying to show he wasn't a threat. "Look, I know this seems weird, but can I just hang out by your fire for a few minutes? I'll explain everything. I need to be around other people right now." Chris and I looked at each other. It was 2 against 1, and we were armed. If he tried anything, we could handle it. Against my better judgment, I nodded. "All right," I said, "but stay where we can see you." The man sat down on a log on the opposite side of the fire from us. For a minute, nobody said anything. He just stared into the flames, his hands shaking slightly. Whether from cold or fear, I couldn't tell. "So what's going on?" I finally asked. He looked up at us, and I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "I was camping down the trail with my buddy. We've been friends for years, do this kind of trip all the time, but tonight something happened. He just snapped." "What do you mean, snapped?" Chris asked. "We were sitting around our fire, just like you guys, and he started acting really strange, paranoid. He kept saying he heard people in the woods, that we weren't alone. I tried to calm him down, told him it was probably just animals, but he wouldn't listen. Then he grabbed our axe. My grip tightened on my own hatchet. He came at me with it." The man continued, his voice cracking slightly. "Just out of nowhere, he raised the axe and swung at me. I barely ducked out of the way. I didn't know what to do. This is my friend, you know? But he kept coming at me, and his eyes, it was like he didn't even recognize me." "Jesus," Chris muttered. "I managed to grab my flashlight, and I just ran into the woods as fast as I could. I've been wandering around for probably an hour now, trying to figure out what to do. Then I saw your fire and thought, I don't know, safety in numbers, maybe?" The story was horrifying, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way he kept looking over his shoulder into the darkness. Maybe it was the way his story seemed almost too detailed, too rehearsed. Or maybe it was just the situation itself. Here we were, miles from any help, with a stranger claiming his friend had just tried to murder him. "Did you call the police?" I asked. He laughed bitterly. "No service out here, man. I tried. Believe me, I tried." He was right. We'd noticed the same thing. No cell coverage for miles. "So where's your friend now?" Chris asked, and I could hear the suspicion in his voice. The man's eyes widened slightly. "I don't know. That's the thing. He could be anywhere out here. He could be..." He trailed off, looking into the dark woods surrounding us. And that's when it hit me. We had no way to verify this guy's story. For all we knew, he was the dangerous one. Maybe he'd done something to his friend and was now coming up with this story. Or maybe there was no friend at all, and this was some kind of ploy. Or maybe, and this was the most terrifying option, his story was completely true, and there really was someone out there in the woods with an axe. The 3 of us sat in tense silence. Every sound from the forest made us jump. Every shadow beyond the firelight could have been his friend creeping closer, or it could have been nothing. We had no way to know. "Look," I finally said, "we can't just leave you out here if your story's true, but we also can't verify anything until morning." The man nodded. "I understand. I know this is weird. I know you don't know if you can trust me, but I swear I'm telling the truth." Chris and I took turns staying awake the rest of the night. One of us would sleep for an hour while the other kept watch, weapons ready, eyes scanning the darkness. The stranger mostly sat quietly by the fire, occasionally adding wood to keep it burning. If he was planning something, he never made a move. When dawn finally broke, the stranger stood up. "Thank you for letting me stay. I'm going to try to hike back to my car and get to somewhere with cell service. Report this properly. Do you want us to come with you?" Chris asked, though I could tell he didn't actually want to. The man shook his head. "No, you guys have done enough. I'll be fine in the daylight." He gathered his lantern and flashlight and walked off down the trail. We watched him until he disappeared around a bend. Chris and I packed up our camp immediately. We didn't even finish our breakfast. We just wanted to get out of there. As we drove out on the Forest Service road, we kept our eyes open for any sign of the stranger's camp or his friend or anything. But we never saw anything. We reported the incident to the local sheriff's department. They took our statement and said they'd investigate, but we never heard anything back. No news reports about an axe attack, no missing persons, nothing. To this day, I don't know what really happened that night. Was the stranger telling the truth? Was his friend really out there in those woods? And if so, what happened to him? Or was the stranger the dangerous one? And we just got lucky that he didn't try anything. I don't know, and that's what keeps me up at night. Not knowing. Because if his story was true, then someone with an axe was wandering those woods while we slept. And if it wasn't true, then what really happened?